about that was they did a live ritual. Did you see that? Foster's imaginary friends had a float. And then all of a sudden, sometimes an athlete just saying never going to shoot you up. So it seems like a 30-second snippet of, chorus, one verse, one chorus. And then Cheese, which is one of the lizard characters, comes out. So it's like there was no doubt what was going on there. And really, literally, the best thing. And it was great because what it means is now the ritual is officially done. Because once the object of the ritual has once he's done it on national TV on Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, where else can you go with it?
Unless you're doing it for the International Space Station.
Yes. I did now use it to hear the other stuff. I did the upgrade. The 2000
The Doodah Parade. When did the Doodah Parade begin? This weekend? Thanksgiving weekend? Used to be like right before.
Okay.
I thought it was the weekend before, but I'm not sure.
It used to be the weekend before, then they moved it because it was colliding with preparations. And frankly, the Rose Parade's okay, but the Doodah Parade's out.
It's a lot easier to get seats in the Doodah.
We're going to have to start the opening ceremony.
Better participants, better acts and marchers and things. I think the Doodah.
Floats are Saturday.
Yeah, floats.
Excuse me?
If you're a member of PIFA, the people for the flowers.
Yes. Any question? We're done. To the bar. Off to the bar.
All these people here for closing ceremonies. This is exciting.
You are aware, aren't you, what the correct explanation for the PETA acronym is? PETA?
Eating tasty animals.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for the folks who are the con chairs. But to begin, we would like to welcome you to the closing ceremonies of Loscon.
I want to thank all of you who came to my panels because we had a good time. Thank you.
All the times we had, and I thank your forbearance for that time. I stripped naked and oiled myself and covered myself in 12 arms. I don't know what I was thinking with that one. I was just.
And we're reasonably certain that the sports bar will never be the same after you guys finish drinking it out.
So we're fiercely proud of everything that we've done here. I think we've accomplished everything Loscon was meant to accomplish, and it's disbanded. Thank you.
We're kind of doing it backwards.
Yes, we are. This is the Benjamin Button convention. We're starting backwards. We're going to move forward. Hey!
You guys are all going to love this, A funny thing happened on the way to the Loscon.
What?
The tech didn't get set up completely as we'd expected. We had some issues. So in a moment, this wall behind us is going to open. And we're going to shift to the next stage. So in about less than 5 minutes, that's all going to happen. So that's our first one.
To let you know, we've been welcoming everybody to closing ceremonies.
Thank you.
Hoping they had a good time.
We have a rolling ceremony.
Right.
Well, we like it this way. We have to make our laps around the city, right?
Well, apparently we are on our way to the forum. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still trying to figure out.
In ancient times.
Yes, yes. So we're going to be this opening ceremony is becoming bigger than you've ever imagined.
And oddly enough, it's opening.
So what you're saying is we're having a whole ceremony just to open up Wolf? Hey, that's our start.
Let's hear it by the hotel guy opening the wall.
We have to open it this way.
But wait, there's more.
But wait! Wait, there's more!
start, can I ask a question of the assembled multitude? How many of you brought ribbons to pass out to people to put on their badges?
Ribbons? Anyone?
Anybody bring ribbons that you're going to be passing out?
I brought ribbons.
Okay.
We have to find them, I'll take one.
I am not asking for ribbons because Lord knows I will have enough. I am asking you occasionally if you have a ribbon and you see some hotel staff person doing something really cool and great, wonderful and taking care of us, give them one of your ribbons, because typically the guy who gets the most ribbons gets a nice spiff from the hotel as an employee for doing this. So this is one other way, besides tipping the maids, that you can help take care of the staff. Shameless plug.
I love
tip the maids. Can you tell I've been here once or twice before in my life? Yes.
Yeah. I think remember the guy who was the ice go for Bacon last year, having this many ribbons by the end of the weekend, because every time he came by and brought us ice, he gave him another ribbon.
Bacon was held at the Santa Hyatt this year.
I can make mountains move. It's amazing.
And the hotel staff got into a competition, and the winner had 67 different ribbons that she was given, because she was the hostess at the restaurant. So everybody came in, she was asking for ribbons, and people were throwing them at her.
Oh, when you start pimping for it.
Well, you know, hey, you got a ribbon? Would you like a nice table?
Nope.
You know, it's cheaper than its wine.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So I gotta take care of it. Here's this ribbon.
Or vamping. I feel like Vanna. And they got it.
Here it is, your new car.
And here is our new
And behind door number 1,
Let's make it a deal.
We're all charging
Okay.
Is it a good price? Scalzi Loscon. We don't know. Middle of the room.
it's a good thing we're in reasonable. You say he didn't sell last time?
So, what we have now is a new room with mics.
Tech, wonderful. I'm gonna be late to my first panel. There you go. That's the parody panel. Wouldn't that be horrible? I did that. Pastiche. I'll be fine. Just let them know I'll be a couple minutes late in the vamp without you.
No problem.
There we go.
Oh, they didn't say there's karaoke too.
There's karaoke too.
Oh man.
They didn't say that. They never say it. It just happens. You ready? Spontaneous karaoke?
New bumper sticker karaoke happens.
I'm not sure how I feel about the subtext of that.
Fans, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
Sorry, they won't come off.
Seriously, I was thinking about doing a spa costume because since, you know, the movie's coming up, I figured I'd get a head start.
Rewrite.
All right, welcome. You guys having fun yet? Yay? No? Yay! Yay, the yays have it. All right, I'm here to introduce our our co-chairs, Kathy Beckstead and Joy Super.
Thank you. Sorry for the late start and the confusion and what room we're in and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, magic happens and the walls do open and here we are talking to you. Scary. Okay, actually, I'll give it over to Joyce right now.
Oh, brother. For our press releases, I actually took on the name Pathetica, and I think I'm really feeling it today. Really, we want to welcome each and every one of you to our convention. This convention was planned just so everybody could have a good time. As you can see, things are going to happen, but we will fix them, we will make you happy, and everybody's going to have a great time. I think at this point, our best bet is to start with our guests of honor. So we have 3 of them, and I think we'd like to introduce Michael Slady first. Michael Slady. Would you like to say a couple words?
Yeah, a funny thing happened on the way to this convention. I want to thank Kathy and Joyce for accosting me during BayCon 2007 and saying, oh, by the way, would you wear this sheet at Loscon 2008? And I, okay, for you guys, anything. Well, it goes with being fan guest of honor, and I kind of fell over, which was really easy because I was walking around on crutches at that time, getting ready for a hip replacement surgery. I'm still kind of falling over from that, but in a good way. I'm delighted to be here. My first Loscon was, I think, number 7 at the Anaheim Sheraton ages and ages and ages ago. I've been an irregular attendee more often than not. I love Loscon. I am grateful that they moved back to one of my favorite convention hotels in the whole wide world, especially when the elevators are working.
Sorry about that.
But that's another story another time, and you have to take the 2 of them to the bar to get the full story. Remember that. The bar is going to be prominent in discussion.
Must happen. Yes.
I'm encouraging all of you to come to my panels. I'll be brilliant. And come to these other guys' panels. They'll be okay. And as Joyce and Kathy and others have said, please have a good time and help everybody else have a good time. Thank you.
And next up we have our artist guest of honor, Gary Lippincott, and so we sort of ran into Gary last night. We met him for the first time as we picked up at the airport, and I think we found him really terrific. I think you guys will too. So there we go. And I give you Gary.
I'm not so sure this microphone is even needed. My voice kind of carries anyhow, but and usually it doesn't have a lot to say. I kind of do what I need to be done through my heart. So I'm not a public speaker by any stretch of the imagination, so bear with me on that. But I am here to have fun. I'm still trying to figure out why they picked me as guest of honor artist. I do mostly fantasy work, not much science fiction, but I enjoy the genre just as much as you people do, and I'm hoping some of that will rub off on me. So I look forward to meeting everybody here, and I hope to have fun too. That's why I'm here also.
Okay, and now we'll go to our 3rd and final guest, our writer guest. Wow, what can we say about him that he hasn't already said about himself? And I give you Mr. John Scalzi.
Last year they sent me an email and they said, we would like you to be the guest of honor at Loscon, and would you accept? And I said, I don't know. Are you going to have someone who will give me in and out doubles animal style at my beck and call? And they said, why, yes, we will. And I said, well, then I'm in. And then later, when I got here, I made the casual mention on the blog that they didn't have any Coke Zero on the premises. They had Diet Pepsi and Diet Coke and stuff like that. And so I just kind of mentioned that. And as a result of that, they gave me 3 12-packs of Coke Zero, which I was very, very pleased about. So one of the things that I'm really enjoying about Loscon is that they seem to give me whatever I want. That having been said, I have a list. Okay, first.
Go on.
a movie development deal with one of the solvent movie studios, not one of those, not like Fox. A monkey navigated rocket car. A children's book contract featuring Bacon Cat, and well, there's more, but this is clearly not the correct forum for that. But
Okay, those drinks in the bar? That's all.
okay. I want to thank all of you for inviting me here. I've been having a glorious time here. I was actually raised in Southern California, so it's been an excuse to see family and friends, and I hope to make a whole bunch of new friends. That would be all of you. So when you see me, just come say hello. I have lots of ribbons to give away. So I'm really looking forward to spending time with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, as John promptly mentioned, that we do have this negotiated deal with him on In-N-Out burgers. Now, we did talk to the hotel. In-N-Out does supply a truck that will come to a site and cook In-N-Out burgers. However, the hotel wasn't too keen on having an outside vendor here for some reason. So we came up with a solution. What we have is a group of people called In-N-Out runners. They are yes! They are staffed out of our New Zine office. We do ask that you do stop by and take a look at, we do have the routes prominently displayed should you be called into active duty. If at any time you see John Scalzi and he looks weak and able to swoon, please notify an In-N-Out runner immediately.
It looks like this.
We will then dash off In-N-Out runner to go get him his requested hamburger.
Yes! This is the best invention ever!
You have to have the special guest of honor badge, which does mean yes if Michael Salady or Gary Lippincott decides they would actually like to have a hamburger as well, and they too take the pose of swooning. We shall go and get them one as well.
Just as a procedural note, we can be bribed.
Keep that in mind.
Please remember this is a non-profit organization.
The hamburgers are solely for educational purposes.
Okay.
Oh, well, then that happens to still the
All righty. Well, thank you, and you'll have a terrific convention.
And we need to get you guys to your panels.
And we're running a little late due to the wall and the rooms and the craziness and stuff, so shall we say, let the games begin. Woo!
Panelist 0.
Good start.
Question.
All by themselves?
Don't ask. You shouldn't ask.
You could ask, but you would be sorry.
Nobody knows.
Are we all here?
In my mother-in-law's boat,
Don't talk to me about your mother. The mishpacha we don't talk about.
but she makes the chopped liver.
I don't care.
Do you know where the liver comes from?
I hate that.
No.
This is not a normal liver.
No.
If it isn't Akimo, I don't care.
Then I won't tell you.
Don't.
You shouldn't know from it.
She has a jar of dirt from Israel, the homeland, the promised land.
That's me.
Who's this?
I'm
You brought your own?
I'm twice as funny as everybody.
You are
Personality.
You're gonna be
A lot of
close
places.
later.
You're sitting in the middle. That means you're in charge.
Am I in charge? Okay, that's fine.
You have a
Then let's go ahead and begin because it's 12:45. How long does this panel last? Anyone?
Don't know. Is it all? They're all an hour.
An hour?
I think if we can talk for an hour,
All right. We talked for an hour.
we could do 12 minutes of Jewish pirate jokes.
Yes, there we go.
We just did.
And you're a good one.
And they're good ones.
A Jewish pirate walks into a bar. Now, all right, the subject of this panel is parody, pastiche, and humor. And let's go ahead and start by introducing our panelists, and then we'll ask them if they are for or against parody, pastiche, or humor. So, John, go ahead and start.
Okay, John. Thanks, John.
You're welcome, John. Always
Well, you're
glad to
both
help, John.
Johns.
It's always nice to be John. I'm John DeChancy. I write parody, pastiche, and humor. At least that's what they say. So I guess I'm for it. Although I'll have something to say about that later. So that's me.
Okay. I'm Laura Francos. I've had stories in, I think, 3 of Esther Friesner's Chicks and Chainmail anthologies, so those are all, I hope, funny. So maybe that's why I'm here. I'm definitely in favor of it. Brighten up your day with a good chuckle. Find some PG Wodehouse and smile.
Oh, PG.
Plum.
Now you're talking about
Yes.
Okay.
I collect newts. No, you gotta go.
No, because I'm the moderator.
Oh, you're the moderator.
I go last.
Oh, you're last
I'm
because
the
you're the
moderator. I make
moderator.
the rules.
You
It's your
are
turn. You must go.
moderate. All right.
I'm in moderate moderator.
Yes, yeah, that's who I am. Mel Gilden, and I wrote the 3 Surfing Samurai Robots Zoot Marlowe books, and a lot of children's fiction, all of whom I hope were pretty damn funny, but I guess there are better people than me have spoken on that subject. And I'm in favor of it too. I think funny is always good. Funny is always good, and if there was more humor in the world, we wouldn't be shooting so much.
So much.
So there.
So
Here,
much.
here.
Yeah.
Give me one of those bottles of water.
Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
And I'm John Scalzi. I'm of no importance whatsoever. I do
He's
have...
the guest of honor.
No.
It says so right here.
It's too much. It's too much.
As long as you don't marry my daughter.
I'm already taken. I think my wife would disagree with me marrying somebody else.
All
right. Right, not in this state. No. So many people I can't marry in this state. It's so depressing. And then probably my most humorous book is The Android's Dream, which starts off with someone farting someone else to death. So when you have a scene like that, it damn well better be funny. It better be funny, because otherwise, kersplat. Could somebody close the door, because we're getting a lot of background noise.
I think it's coming in from over here.
Yeah.
Film programming on opposite sides.
Right, exactly. So we'll be miming it from now on. Now, so we're all for
Anybody in here
pastiche and
against
humor. See how much better it is now?
Oh, you're right.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Go ask.
We're all for parody, pastiche, and humor, and of course we're awesome. And yet, it does seem like very often it's very difficult to sell humor or in science fiction, and not so much fantasy. That has its own category, but particularly in science fiction. I'll give you an example. I have a book which is called Agents of the Stars, which was the first novel I wrote. And the first time I tried to shop it around, what I heard back from people was, this is great, but we can't sell funny science fiction. It's just not something that's out there in the market. Now, if we all like humor, and you all like humor, and we're all awesome, why is it that there's sometimes, why is there such a difficulty?
I have a report of swooning. Someone call.
Burger time.
All right. I want to see this in action.
Well, you can't. These are your keys. And there's a small problem.
More humor, more humor.
And for you, sir, double fried animal fries.
Oh, awesome.
Double animal stuff. I was told you already had the Coke Zero.
I do have the Coke Zero. Excellent.
Excellent.
All right, I got to put the animal fries in.
I love the
here.
bag.
You like it, isn't it?
It's the holiday time of year.
This is the best convention ever. I told them that I would come if they got me doubles on demand. Do I have to read?
Oh, you don't have to worry about a thing.
So
This is no.
you don't want me to do this.
Oh yeah, no, that'll be fine. Just don't forget, as an actor, this is the actor's worst nightmare. You want fries with that?
There, no more food.
All right.
It's good to be the guest of honor.
It's good to be the guest. Would anyone like animal-style fries?
I'll pass.
They're good.
No.
I'll show you what my
Trying to cut out my
uncle,
carbs, you know.
Is it possibly the publisher saying, well, if you're in the sci-fi genre, you can't be in the humor genre?
Well, that could be possible, but first, let's get it from our panelists. John.
Now that Tadao has totally upstaged us, I have a funny story about humor. I started writing about 1980 or thereabouts, 81 actually, my first novel. And it took a while, you know, it takes months and months to do your first novel. And I thought I was writing a pretty good, straightforward voice. Yes, okay. I thought I was writing straightforward action, adventure, science fiction story, you know, and that's the way I thought it worked out. Lots of people thought too. And the first review came along. I think it was in Science Fiction Chronicle. May have been in Locus, I forget. And, you know, it was a pretty good review. In fact, it was an excellent review. But at the end, the reviewer said, oh, by the way, this, you know, this stuff is really funny in spots. It's really, the humor is just absolutely ha, 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 you know. And I thought, I don't remember any humor in this story. I was really worried there. I mean, and it just made a point of saying how witty and wordplay and puns, and I said, what the hell is he talking about? So I looked through the book, I could not find it. I don't know what this guy was talking about, but other people subsequently have said that this book is really funny, and all my stuff contained. And at some point in my career, I think around the 90s, I said, okay, let's try comedy. Well, so David Bischoff and I got together. I wanted an accomplice, you know, a collaborator. And the reviewer said that in some countries they shoot collaborators. So we put out a straightforward science fiction comedy series, you know, we ran 2 or 3 books. It was a complete and utter failure. Critically, as well as just, it didn't sell. It didn't sell. So I found that when you, and I wrote, I think, 2 or 3 other pointedly comedic science fiction works, and it's true, they don't sell. So if you want to write humor, do it like I did at first. Write straightforward story, put everything you can into it, and if you want to leaven it, then go ahead, but not, for God's sake, go for comedy. In anything, fantasy or science fiction, because I've written, well, that's the other thing, see, I'm also a fantasy writer, and I wrote a long series of fantasy novels that everybody says are ha-ha hilarious, but no, they're not, because the story is in there. And some of the stories are not, yeah, they're dark, but still the humor finds its way in. So that's the way to do it.
Laura.
Well, I think part of it also is that writing humor is hard, writing good humor, and sustaining that for a long period of time as a novel length rather than short story length. I mean, it's easy to center something around, you know, just a joke. My husband, Harry Turtledove, has been known to perpetrate many a story that ends in a god-awful pun, but he tries not to do it for very long. Toxic spell dump, you know, to the contrary. But
which was a great book.
Thank you. I will pass that on to him. Some of the best writing, I think, is writing that is dependent on good characters, and some of the best humor, I think, is humor that is character-derived. And pulling that off is really difficult, so maybe that's part of why we don't see a whole lot of it, and maybe it's easier to do in fantasy where setups are already, can be sillier and may lend themselves more to it than in science fiction setting.
Well, I definitely want to go back to humor and characterization, but before I do, I wanted to check in with Mel, see if he had any other opening thoughts on that.
I have opening thoughts. I think that it is possible to be funny on purpose, and it is possible to write funny science fiction. And the first thing that comes to my mind is Bill the Galactic Hero by Harry Harrison. Now, granted, we don't see very much of this, and this is a very unusual book. But others have done as well, I think. I mean, it was written, when was Bill the Galactic Hero? Sometime in the 70s, wasn't it?
I think it was early 70s.
Yeah,
maybe late
and
60s,
a
early
wonderful
70s.
book, and hilarious fun, and science fiction. The stuff that I write is, and I think that this is a question that maybe we should ask, is there a difference between light and funny? Because a lot of the stuff that I write is, it doesn't have to do with starving children and dads who are axe murderers and so on. It has to do with more unusual kinds of things. They have adventures with creatures from space and so on. Certainly the Surfing Samurai Robots books, starring an alien with a big nose who thinks he's Philip Marlowe. Is that funny? I don't know. I just sort of go along and treat the characters as serious as they want to be, and the fact that the characters are somewhat humorous in themselves, I think, is what makes it work. I want to call this situation comedy, not sitcom in the sense that TV uses it,
Right.
but situation in the sense that it's funny because of the way things are happening, rather than people standing around and telling each other jokes. I think any kind of fiction where they stand around and tell each other jokes is probably not going to work.
No.
But if they say things and you can look back on it and say, oh, that was just as you might say to a friend of yours in conversation, and he or she will say something that you think is pretty funny, it's okay because it's in character and it all works. The other book that comes to mind immediately is Chester Anderson's The Butterfly Kid, which is one of the funniest books. Now, I guess it also is actually science fiction.
And when was that?
Probably late 60s, early 70s also. And it's about these Greenwich Village hippies who saved the world from giant blue lobsters, which in itself is a funny idea. And the reason it works is because he treats it as a real thing happening. And it's quite wonderful. And I'd also like to recommend to you Daniel Pinkwater.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, Daniel Pinkwater writes primarily for kids,
Right.
but you won't feel like an idiot reading his stuff.
Right.
My favorite of his books is The Snark-Out Boys and the Avocado of Death.
I'm particularly fond of, I was a second grade werewolf.
Which is
because
also good.
I get it, which is a picture book, and you get to the line where the teacher says, "Lawrence Talbot, stop that growling," and that's absolutely lost.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let me go back to, and actually it's as much a follow-on to what you were just saying. We're talking about humor that comes out of characterizations. I know that, for example, in my own work, like Old Man's War, a lot of people found the Old Man's War book pretty funny because the characters were amusing, but a lot of that comes specifically from the personalities of the characters themselves. Now, one of the things that science fiction gets dinged for, outside of the genre more than inside the genre, but it's still a reasonable criticism, is that it is based, it's mechanistic. That the science, it's a literature of ideas, not as much as characterization. So let me throw this out and ask, does science fiction have a character deficit, and does that make it more difficult to do humor? Anyone?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's difficult to do humor with science fiction because there's been a lot of it. So I don't think so. But the characters, that's a different panel, isn't it? Characterization in science. See, I struggle with this all the time because I teach science fiction writing online for Writer's Digest. Writer's Digest workshops. Are you in on that?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I've been doing it for years. So I just started another workshop yesterday, and struggling with the idea that okay, it's the literature of ideas. Does that mean that your characters are stick figures? Well, no, of course not. I can think of Harry Sullivan, John Amalfi, the character in The Demolished Man. Twisted characters, all kinds of complex stuff. Maybe not on the, but again, I've never read a science fiction book that was about character as Catcher in the Rye is about character, you know? And it's only about character.
Right.
There's very little plot. There's nothing almost, you know, but still, it fills up a whole book. You know, the Holden Caulfield and his predicament, you know, his philosophical predicament. So I've never read a science fiction novel like on that order. So maybe there was something to what you said. I mean, so I'm pulled in that direction.
Yeah.
You know.
See, I mean, because for me at least, it's a considerable thing. I mean, I really like giving my characters. You have to do it in the context of you've got a certain amount of story that you have to tell, all these other things, but you want to make the readers care about the characters, and so that when they say something that is amusing, or they say something that is sort of black humor, or anything along that line, that they don't get it just because here's the author saying something that is darkly humorous, or saying something just to make a joke, that it is legitimately the character saying that thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that is not always accomplished in science fiction, that humor often seems a little bit like the author showing off.
Well, it's not always accomplished anywhere. You know, I mean, the problems of science fiction generally are the problems of literature, you know, and...
it might be the problems of fandom. I'm going to say something that's probably going to get me in trouble, but fans...
You're recording, right? Go.
Fans are an awful hard audience. They're a tough room. I've always found it so. I mean, I consider myself a person who can tell a joke, but it's hard to make fans laugh because fans always think, I could have made a better joke. It wasn't all that funny, you know? So I even had fans say that about my writing. You know, well, it's funny, but you know, you're not all that funny.
Well,
I've had that.
Let's talk briefly about the funny episodes of Star Trek. You know, and Tribbles was a funny episode, A Piece of the Action was a funny episode, and there might have been others, and nothing comes to mind immediately, but those two certainly. And what makes them funny? Is the Tribbles episode funny because the Tribbles are there? I don't think so. You can write you can write a boring story about, I mean, what are they? You know, they're like Powder Puffs, right? The reason that thing works is because everybody has something to do, you know, and they all have to deal with it. And
it also works if you have Highlander steal. Oh, did I say that?
Well, sure, yeah, the Flat Cats.
Erase that.
But he didn't. He didn't write the same story that David wrote.
Right.
It's a different story. A Piece of the Action. Once again, it's funny because watching Spock and Kirk wearing the coats and the hats and trying to teach Spock how to talk like a gangster, and that's not working very well. And Kirk trying to drive a car with a stick shift, and they work because you know these people, you know they're generally very serious folks, and yet here they are trying to do these other things. The other thing that makes it work is the fact that they're both real stories. You know, they're not funny.
That's what I said first.
Yeah, and you're right about that. They're both real stories. If they had not been real stories, then they become Saturday Night Live.
Right, they become sketches.
They become sketches. Yeah.
They become parody.
Yes, but as far as science fiction that has it deals entirely with character, I think we're doing better and better with that as the years go on, because of course science fiction started just pretty much talking about what's our latest machine here.
Right.
But I can think, once again, I can think of two very fine science fiction novels, both having to do with character. One is The Star's My Destination. Gully Foyle is a terrific character, and he does things that only Gully Foyle would do. And the other one, actually, there's a bunch. The later Robert Silverberg, I'm thinking of Dying Inside in the Book of Skulls. Wonderful, not just good science fiction, but if it hadn't been for the fact that science fiction is always judged by its worst examples, these two novels in particular are just good books. You know, and they're both very much character-driven, unlike a lot of stories that are character-driven, which I hate. Because they say, oh, my story is character-driven, and what that means is there's no story. So you have to be very careful about that.
This is one thing that I do love about science fiction is that when it comes down to brass tacks, they still want to tell you a story.
Yes.
You know, that's very, very fun.
Well, I have seen any number, for instance, of the later Twilight Zone, not Rod Serling's, but the stuff that came later, where stuff happens and they kind of go along, and then something happens at the end, and it's kind of a twist. But it's not. He didn't have to do anything.
Right.
You know, he just kind of had to live through it, and now he's somewhere else, and that's for me not a story.
No.
But now we're not. I'm not talking about humor anymore.
Yeah,
We're getting into character now. I'm sorry.
I would nominate as an outstanding example both of just a hilarious, funny book and wonderful character development, Lois McMaster Bujo's A Civil Campaign, in which you have various political machinations going on along with various lovesick characters attempting to get together, having fateful blow-ups, and ultimately ending happily. But I just giggle all the way through. That's one of the ones I'll pull out. If I'm feeling blue, I'll pull out that one.
Honey Willis Road.
Doomsday Book?
No, it's not the Doomsday Book. There's
3
Men in a Boat to say nothing of the dog.
To say nothing of the dog, and also another good example. But then she's using as her model there Jerome K. Jerome, one of the best British humorists.
We're about at the half-hour point. I'm going to open up to questions in a few minutes. But before that, we do that. I want to toss out another one of my pet theories, and hear how
more mushy goss.
Yeah, what? I'm going to throw it out. If you hate it, you hate it. Okay. And what it is that in 1977, Star Wars came out, and it literally swamped the idea of what a science fiction film was. For the next, for a very long time, everything just had shades of Star Wars in it. And it took a long time before science fiction film, in particular, sort of recovered from that. I want to say that there was a similar swamping event in science fiction, particularly as regards humor. And that was the book debut of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And this, I think, was a huge problem. In one sense, it was wildly successful because there's something about the sort of British farcical tradition that really resonates with fans, and I suspect a lot of that might be because it's farcical, and fandom sometimes doesn't always get the subtle humor. This is a very politically correct way of saying we have shades of Asperger on our spectrum. And so farcical is just like, boom, it's there, and that's why it's so beloved. But the problem is that it became so successful, became such the model of humor in science fiction, that for the longest time, any time that you saw an attempt at science fiction humor, it was more or less a shade of Hitchhiker's Guide. And there's the problem with British farce is it really helps to be a farcical Briton, a British person to carry it off. So I think that
Terry Pratchett.
Right. So part of the problem is that science fiction is still recovering from this, extinction event in terms of humor, which is not a diss on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. When I was 11 years old, I almost peed myself because I was laughing so hard. But it is a problem. I mean, that's my theory.
It is funny. That's it. I mean, when it's been on radio, they did it at BBC, and they did a film, right?
Yeah.
My God, it really had legs.
Yeah.
But is it funnier than Blackhead? That's the question.
Well,
I think Blackhead was funnier, but I don't.
This sort of thing happens all the time, where there will be I don't know, is it seminal or germinal? You could tell us whether it's seminal or germinal. But I was thinking about this just the other day in terms of spy stories. If you watch spy movies from like the 30s and the 40s, they're very, very different from what happened after Ian Fleming got a hold of it. Because after Ian Fleming with the big Dr. No, Goldfinger kind of character, and this one guy going in and destroying explosions and car chases and girls and things. Before that, it was the stories were much, much smaller, where perhaps a person who was not really involved in this was being chased by the bad guys because they thought he was involved, or somebody is carrying around a piece of paper that somebody else wants. And they're very small, intimate little, I mean, they would always end up and an inn somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and there wouldn't be any explosions. They might shoot each other, but there wouldn't be the explosions. So I was thinking about Ian Fleming in this respect.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if we, as a race, are over it yet. You know, because still, if you watch a new, even a non-James Bond.
Yeah, well, the Bourne.
The Bourne stuff, it all looks like Ian Fleming. It all looks like Ian Fleming. The Hitchhiker's Guide, of course, is similar to that. Tolkien, my God.
Yeah.
Tolkien, how much does he have to answer for? You know, he's the progenitor of the three-part fantasy.
Right.
And a lot of people who are not as good as he was think that they can get away with this. And some of them have. So I think it's something that we can get over. I think the next genius will come along. I don't know who it is.
Right.
I don't know who it is. But I think the next genius will come along and say, well, we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it Douglas Adams the way we can do it. Douglas Adams was great,
Right.
but we can do it some other way now. And I don't know who that person will be, but I suspect
Why,
it will
it's me,
happen.
of course.
Well, I knew it was you.
Yes.
Well, but this is in all seriousness when I did the Android stream, which was, the humor of that is very much more like, and intentionally so, very much more like an Elmer Leonard or a Carl Hyacin sort of humor. Simply because I wanted to say, I want to try to do a book that has humor in it, but it was still, you know, had action, adventure, and everything else, but at the same time comes from a different sort of humor tradition, and see how that works. And since Tor had already signed me to a 2-book contract, they couldn't say no. Which was actually, I hate to say, it was actually key, because they were like, we got Old Man's War out of you, we've got a sequel coming from you, this middle book, whatever, you know. And so I was like, well, in that case.
What do you think of Cory Doctorow's fiction as opposed to other stuff he does?
In terms of humor? I think it's interesting stuff. I mean, I'm biased because I'm a friend of Cory's, but I think that he certainly comes from, and this goes back to, I think, one of the things that you're talking about, is that there is a generation of writers who've come up sort of basically digital, and a lot of his humor and a lot of his perspective comes from that sort of point of view. And so a lot of it, there's going to be a generational schism, I think, with his work, and sometimes with a lot of the work from writers under like the age of 35, where a lot of the material is going to, you know, you kind of have to be immersed in it to get it.
I think you're absolutely right, John. Mm-hmm. I think there is a big divide there.
Yeah.
Because most of it is lost on me, and I've been using a computer since the 1970s.
Right.
It's 1960s. I'm sorry, that's how old I am. So.
My God, they had
not a desktop in the 1960s. I'm talking about mainframe.
Started with an abacus.
Right. We used the slide rule.
Not quite. An IBM
Slide rule. Everybody know what a slide rule is?
Variation. Log trigger, that's a trigger.
Oh, now you're just showing off.
I learned what a slide from Heinlein. He talked about the slip stick.
Yeah, you know.
Jeez.
I
still have mine. I don't use it, but I still.
I find Cory elusive in his greater import of what he's trying to say.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's a lot of that's going to happen just as a natural progression. So now we will actually get to questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, as this lovely woman here is doing.
Regarding the next phase of science fiction comedy, could it be cultural? That the comedy is based in cultural reference and, you know, like wall counts?
Well, that's what parody and pastiche is. I mean, when you get right down to it, is that everybody has a common understanding, and therefore you can sort of bring the changes off of that. And I certainly think that particularly the younger generation of writers, to get back to Cory and the rest, are very immersed in parody and pastiche and also irony to such an extent that they don't even recognize that is indeed what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that they are doing it in an unschooled fashion or they're ignorant of the effect, but it is just such a natural aspect of, you know, being a member of Generation X or the Millennials or something like that. Irony is baked into your personality.
It can be very funny. It can be very successful, but
it can be annoying as hell.
It can be, that's it. But if you look at it in the long run, you come to a book like that, say 15, 20 years from now, and people who are younger will lack that cultural reference to get all of this. I was amused to see the theme of this convention is a funny thing happened on the way to the Loscon, which is of course a play on Stephen Sondheim's musical. I'm a big Broadway buff.
Yeah.
A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, and I've always regarded that particular musical as one that will not age because it's inspired by the Roman comedies of Plautus, and the scenarios we have there are ones that still resonate 2,000 years later. You have, you know, the domineering wife. You have the henpecked husband who is lusting for the lovely maid. You have the young boy who wants desperately to get the girl. You have the conniving clever figure, and they're scenarios that the Romans laughed at 2,000 years ago, and we're still laughing at now. And I fully suspect that 2,000 years from now, that people will still be laughing at them. You know, it's timeless.
Yeah. One of the differences between why parody and pastiche are lesser disciplines, so to speak, than humor is. Humor is rooted in the universal human condition. Everybody can smile. But parody requires understanding of what has come before in the genre, and pastiche even more so. It's like when you write something, it's like, oh well, that's very Heinleinian, or or it's very something else. You have to have the understanding that it's Heinleinian to do it. People who are over the age of 30 recognize that Old Man's War is very much a pastiche of Heinlein. People who are younger than 30, who have not necessarily read Heinlein natively, don't get it at all. And so that's an interesting, schism of perspectives.
Yeah. There is, I listen to a lot of old radio, and I'm a particular fan of the old Jack Benny program. So I listen to that, and then I listen to the Bob Hope show. Now, Bob Hope was incredibly popular in his time when he was on the radio. Somewhere near the top, he and Jack Benny both. And yet, Jack Benny is still funny, and Bob Hope is not. And the reason Bob Hope is not was because of all his timely references. You know, he would talk about things that people knew, the Monica Lewinsky of their time, you know? And I listen to them now, and the audience goes crazy with laughter, and I say, who is this person, and why is it funny? And that's really perhaps a big difference.
I had a critic take me to task in one novel for sexism. He thought that one character was treating another female character with disrespect, and I said, well, and I encountered him on Jeannie. Remember Jeannie?
No, that was before my time.
I encountered him on a online, whatever.
That's important.
Anyway, and I said, listen, that sequence or that humor was based on the Marx Brothers, you know, Groucho and Margaret Dumont, the characters played by Marx. And he said, who? And I said, oh God.
So now we have the problem. The irony, though, is that parody and pastiche is immediately often much more successful than genuine humor, because people like feeling that they're in the know. They like feeling like, you know, oh, I get this immediately. Whereas a lot of humor can be subtle, can be stuff that's not immediately obvious, unless it is slapstick or pratfalls or something like that. Which is why, for example, you know, in movies you have all those, you know, date movie or, you know, Meet the Spartans or, you know, that sort of stuff, and they all do like $30 to $50 million worth of business, and you know, they disappear like 2 weeks later. And if you were to watch them 10 years from now, you would be like, why am I doing this? It's 2 hours of my life I won't get back.
Unless you watch them as a child, and now you're watching them again and having a nostalgic experience.
Yeah.
That happens too.
In which case, I apologize to you that this is your nostalgia. You know, it's not necessarily a good thing. But that's, you know, that is the difficulty of humor.
I disagree.
You do?
Yeah,
That's impossible.
It's not only possible; it's happening. No, I've been to a lot of old radio meetings. You know, where people they love the old radio, and I do too. And 9 times out of 10, what will inevitably happen will be they'll talk about, well, you know, we used to have these great radio. We listened to Little Orphan Annie and the Lone Ranger, and we had all this great stuff. And kids today don't know what they're missing. And this is garbage.
Yeah.
Because kids today are getting exactly what they want and what they need. And when they get to be 75 years old, they will say exactly the same thing as these 75-year-old people. We had this wonder, and it was wonderful, and we loved it. And so I think quality has very little to do with this song.
That's absolutely true.
I've been watching Space Patrol episodes. Is anybody here old enough to remember Space Patrol, or am I the only one in the room? Yeah, right. All the geezers in the place. Yeah.
Smile when you say
Smile.
that.
I can say it because and you know, and I'm watching them, and it's like I'm two separate people. One of the people who's watching Space Patrol says, "This is really dreadful. Obviously done for $1.50. The acting is overblown. They don't have any budget for special effects or for backdrops or anything." And the other half is saying, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? I love watching Buzz Corey do his thing." You know, and I think that's there's always, if you're honest with yourself, there's always those two people when you're dealing with nostalgia.
It's funny you mentioned that because I tried to, I got you, and I'll get you in just a second. My daughter is 9, it was a couple years ago.
She doesn't understand anything.
Oh, au contraire. But we got the Schoolhouse Rock DVD, so that we could show her that, and she's totally unimpressed with it. The way that she got her, 50 states of the, and the capitals is by Yakko. Maniacs. And I'm just like, it's exactly as you say. It's different. It's the different particular objects, but it's the same dynamic.
It's the same dynamic.
Yes, sir. You in the blue shirt.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
go ahead.
Interrupting your Rosie.
Okay, what the hell, interrupt. I want to go back to characterization. I want to take a step outside the genre, and perhaps some of the best character-driven fiction in the series is George MacDonald Fraser, Flashman. And in a way, it's timeless because he starts writing these. In fact, he even did, of all things, he actually did screenplay to one of the James Bond movies. But in a way, by picking historical fiction, which is not usually a laugh-a-lot genre, not intentionally at least, he's taken this heroic character, this total cad and murderer, thief, womanizer, and stuck him in these very stuffy Victorian settings and just rolling. Now, I admit, if I had a magic wand, I would turn this is the kind of stuff I'd love to write.
Yeah.
The problem is there is no Victorian period science fiction.
But there could.
Yes, there is. We're going to do an H.G. Wells panel at 4:15.
Yeah. Well, not only that. I mean, this is the promise and peril of science fiction, which is that you can do whatever you like in science fiction. If you want to make a neo-Victorian era, like Neil Stephenson did in the Diamond Age, you can certainly do that. But the thing is what makes it difficult is that you have to ground it well enough that you can carry it off, and that the people that you create in that universe respond to the events in the universe the way that they would naturally, not just stick figures again. And again, this comes to the issue of building characters. Characters are a unit of the world, and if you want them to respond humorously or sensitively or any sort of way in that world, you do have to build that world sufficiently and to a level of sufficient complexity that they become believable.
But again, you had this Victorian era. Look at the Blazing Saddles. I mean, this entire genre of the Western.
Right.
And I'm not doing it as just parody here.
Right.
Everybody knew all the jokes.
Right.
Knew the campfire scene, etc.
Yeah.
There was a common knowledge there. And
But with Blazing Saddles and a lot of movies like it, you're dealing with anachronism, and that's what you're laughing at.
Right.
You're not laughing at the era itself. You're laughing at the fact that there are a lot of things. Duke Ellington with a piano in the middle of the desert. What is it? It's, anybody moves and the nigger gets it. Yeah. Okay.
And
can I still say that?
I wasn't good.
You were quoting. It's okay.
We're recording.
Oh, we are recording.
But it's a direct quote, so you're okay.
It's
but
it's also,
and it's also the case in the case of Blazing Saddles that he is doing a parody of more than one thing. He's doing a parody of the Westerns, obviously, but he's also doing a parody of the current state of race relations back in '73, which is when the movie came out. The really funny thing about that is I recently watched Blazing Saddles again, and I actually saw it when it came out when I was like 4, and I was like, I don't know what this is about. But man, it's funny. But I watched it.
My mom left the theater to go to the restroom and came back in when they had gone to Dom DeLuise and all of the guys. She's going to my dad, what happened? What happened?
But I watched it, and I watched Young Frankenstein as sort of a at-home double feature. And it seems to me that one has aged better than the other because the Westerns are not as predominant in our tradition or in our memory now as science fiction, and in particular the Frankenstein mythos is. I mean, that gets reinvented every 20 or 30 years, whereas the Western is still, the Appaloosa just came out and stuff like that, but it's beginning to peter out. If you were to pitch a Western parody these days, it would not get greenlit, whereas you could do another Frankenstein parody.
I think sometimes about even Dracula. I understand that when Lugosi's Dracula first was released, people were fainting and being dragged out of the theaters, and now you can pretty much show it to your kids, and we've gone from
Twilight.
And Twilight, and then we've gone for this very scary. What was it called? Nosferatu,
Yes.
which I understand is really creepy.
It is really creepy.
And we've gone from Nosferatu to Count Chocula. And I think this is enormously interesting. And the Count on Sesame Street.
Well, I think this is what you're pointing at too is something that culturally happens is and vampires have gotten defanged, so to speak. Partly because.
Vampires suck, that's right.
Partly because there has been such a history of parody and pastiche that we are more familiar with Count Chocula than we are with Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And it also means that in order for the vampire mythos or something like that to survive, it's changed into, rather than this, this sort of creepy, cinematically speaking, creepy guy with a cape and stuff like that, it becomes Edward Cullen of the Twilight Saga, which, he's this thing to be, my 9-year-old daughter went to go see Twilight.
He wasn't first, what about Angel?
Yeah, what about Angel? What about the
Spike.
Interview with a Vampire? I mean, this is
not new.
This is all reinvention. And to get back to the humor and parody, as you were saying earlier, what we may have to see in order for humor to once again succeed in the science fiction genre is that fundamental reinvention of how it's done. Otherwise, what we end up with is just the same old tired tropes.
This discussion is taking a lot out of me. Feeling drained. But think of something though. Think of Mel Brooks, as you brought up all these examples of parody and pastiche on film. As his career progressed, everything, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, perfect. Perfect pastiche, perfect parody.
Right.
It's just, I just saw it recently, and it holds up. It's just marvelous.
Did you like Spaceballs?
And he made more movies. He made Silent Movie and High Anxiety. And each one was funny in their way, but they sort of started to go downhill, don't you think?
Yes.
This is my opinion.
Well, then you ended up with Dracula Dead and Loving It, which was
Everything you always wanted.
and you're like, this is not Mel Brooks. Where did that come from?
Producers is another category.
Yes,
I
it
think.
Yes.
That had a story. And
Yes.
it's a comedy.
Okay.
It was not a pastiche.
All right, let me get with you, and then we'll get with you. Yes, sir.
I had a point. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, the point is that I think with pastiche and that kind of humor, it has a point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
I think if you just keep cranking that engine, things wear out very quickly, and you just can't keep up with it.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, sir. Gracie.
I missed a couple minutes, but have we mentioned dark comedy or black humor?
I'm for it. I'm for it a lot. And I think that it actually is something that science fiction can be very well suited for, particularly because science fiction very often has, as you were mentioning sort of with respect to Ian Fleming, that there's often a lot at stake. There's a world in peril, there's, things that are universally, a universal problem. And so that having a crisis that large really does allow for the opportunity for black humor, because that's a natural way for humans to react. You know, it's like if you go to any major crisis in history, there's always, it's accompanying black humor. And I think what often happens with science fiction is everybody is, you know, as we say, so very serious. There is not someone there who is doing the obvious, you know, comedy relief. You know, it's like if you know, an asteroid came and was like a day away from, you know, flattening us all. I really would be sitting there going, I don't have to return my videos. You know.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity.
It's a human response, I
Yeah.
think, because I've never been, thank God, in a war situation myself. But I understand the people who have been in war, the jokes they're very dark, you know, but they fly fast and furious because it's a release. You know, we're going to be, you know, any minute now, they're going to come with a bomb or a grenade or whatever it is, and there are guys after us with big guns, and the only defense is to tell a joke about it. Yeah, and if the best war movies are full of jokes.
But I don't think that there is a whole lot of necessarily black humor in science fiction recently. I can't think, I mean, excluding, you know.
I think you have to go to Slipstream for that.
Yeah.
I bet everybody understands that term.
Slipstream?
What the hell does it mean?
It means stuff that's not like the stuff that you used to read when you were a kid.
Thanks.
That's pretty much exactly what it means. It's like, we don't, you know, we can't sell it to analog. Is basically. So, yes, purple shirt.
I was going to make a comment on the whole idea of some humor sort of becoming outdated. Laura, you brought up a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, and I would just say, in my opinion, that's something that is already dated and not as funny, because the way I see it, the jokes on that turn on assumed gender roles that have already changed so much, and it's either perpetuates and then it inverts. And that's what's funny. I mean, a henpecked husband, if you don't know the husband is supposed to be the boss, how is that funny? So, in my opinion, that's the sort of thing that part already is sort of probably, to give it to a 20-year-old nowadays and not going to be as funny.
But I agree with that. But I also wonder is the 20-year-old is generally aware that the way that things were 2,000 years ago is not necessarily the way that things are today. So I think there's at least some residual.
I would say it doesn't make it funny to you necessarily.
No,
Right.
Okay. Thoughts?
Well, the only thing that I wanted to add, and was that just a 5-minute?
Yeah, that was
10 minutes.
That was a blurry thing.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I thought it said 10.
It said asteroid coming.
Oh, okay. When I saw that Craig had put me on this panel, I remembered that a while ago there was a New Yorker article about this professor in England who was researching humor and trying to determine what the world's funniest joke was. And naturally I couldn't find it, but I decided, all right, I'll Google world's funniest joke, and sure enough I got a link to this professor.
I know the world's funniest joke.
Okay.
2 peanuts. 2 peanuts crossed the Strasse. Und one was a salted peanut. That's what Monty Python said was the funniest joke. It's the joke that won the war.
That's right.
Oh, that's the joke that won the war.
That's the joke that won the war.
And you're still alive.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay.
I didn't mean it.
Anyway,
Yes, I did.
his name is Richard Weissman, and he's at some university in England. And back in 2002, he was researching humor, and so he got this website going in which he was asking people to post what they thought was their funniest joke, and ended up getting something like 40,000 different jokes on it, and was asking people to, okay, read and rank, and ended up getting millions of responses, and came up with some interesting ideas. And among his basic conclusions are there is a gender difference between what men and women think are funny based upon what people were voting for.
The Three Stooges.
Okay, yeah, the Three Stooges naturally comes up. I'm female and I like the Three Stooges, and apparently this makes me odd.
Yeah.
And I don't like them, and I'm okay.
But some of his conclusions regarding gender differences were that men tended to like humor that was more aggressive and had more sexual innuendo, and women tended to favor jokes that involved wordplay. and the site that I found listed the two jokes that ended up being his top vote getters. Shall I inflict them on you?
Yes, please.
Okay, the number one funniest joke in the world, according to this fellow's website and his millions of responders, was: two hunters are walking in the woods, and as they're going along, one of them suddenly collapses. He's glassy-eyed, he's pasty-faced, he looks like he's barely breathing. The other hunter gets on his cell phone and finally contacts help, and is in a panic, and he's, what do I do, what do I do? And the responder says, okay, stay calm. First thing you need to do is make sure he's dead. Bang! Okay. Now what? So that was the number one. The one that placed second, I don't know if this relates to the fact that this survey was based in Britain or not, but it's a Sherlock Holmes joke.
Oh, I know this one.
Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are out camping. They pitch their tent, they settle their campfire, they go to bed. In the middle of the night, Holmes nudges Watson. Watson, look up, what do you see? I see millions of stars, Holmes. Yes, Watson, and what do you deduce from this? Well, I conjecture that since there are millions of stars out there, there may be millions of other solar systems, and they may have planets on them. What else can you deduce? Well, with those millions of stars and possibly thousands of solar systems and hundreds of planets, that perhaps some of them out there could sustain life, and there could be life out there that could be similar to ours. Nonsense, Watson, you idiot! What you're supposed to deduce is that someone has stolen our tent!
I actually put that in the Ghost Brigade.
Excellent.
Because some of the characters are humor deficient. So the guy tells that joke, and he goes, well, that's not funny at all. And the respondent was like, that's not funny at all. Of course he would recognize the tent was missing. And the other one's going, see, you are funny. We actually are down to the last 3 minutes. So all right, make it quick. Make it quick.
Eye of Argon.
Oh, wow. See, but that's not
unintentional comedy.
Yeah, Eye of Argon is it's so hard to explain to you. It's the world's worst manuscript, and it was supplied to some publisher, and it's just sort of gone and become a science fiction legend because it is just so bad that you read it and it's just like, I can't believe how horrible this is. I have to read more. But I would say,
robot monster of its time.
yeah, I would genuinely say that is actually an example of pastiche. Horrible pastiche.
Did I mention that I teach writing?
Yes.
You know what
Teach Eye of Argon?
You use Eye of Argon?
Did you teach this guy?
There was a
It's not
time.
unique.
There was a
Argon is
theory
not unique.
at one time that Robert Silverberg had written the Eye of Argon on purpose to be that bad. And I have heard since that this is probably not the case.
There was one
dead.
book called Atlanta Nights that was intentionally written by a bunch of science fiction writers to be horrible in order to publish America as a scam artist. And it's available online. Just look up Atlanta Nights, and it really is that bad. And it's actually difficult for published writers to write as poorly as that intentionally. I mean, lots of published writers write badly. Not anybody on this panel, but it certainly does happen. But to actually intentionally write, you have to go against what you know about humor, about parody, about pastiche, about everything, and intentionally write bad. And it's much harder to do than you would think. So this is, we're out of time, unfortunately, sir. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope you had a good time.
Very nice to meet you. It's wonderful to meet you. You're from far away.
I'm originally from here, but live in Bradford, Ohio.
Bradford,
Hey, look at that.
All hail the glorious leader.
So it's 5 minutes in, and David Gerald hasn't shown up yet, so we can either send a runner over to the green room to see if he's here, or does anyone feel like going and checking out? Or we can just go ahead and proceed. What do you guys think?
You can start and I'll go look.
Would you mind terribly? Thanks. Oh, do you know if David Gerald is here?
I don't know.
She was supposed to be here, so we have someone going in.
And I got lost getting here, so God knows he may have too. So, thank you.
Could be, could be.
All right. Well,
I can
welcome.
find out if he's checked in.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you for showing up to our panel about overrated books and overlooked classics. And I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves, starting with the official one.
My name is Donnie Collin. I am a freshly and newly minted Tor author. My brother and I wrote a book called The Unincorporated Man, which is coming out this March. In brief, it's about a world in which people buy and sell stocks and shares of each other like we buy and sell stocks and shares today. What would a world like that look like? It's one of 3 bought by Tor. I am an advertising copywriter who, because I was unemployed at the time and my brother was unemployed at the time, decided, what the heck, let's get together and write a novel. We did, and fortunately Tor bought it. So I've spent the last year or so playing catch-up. I've always enjoyed science fiction, but not nearly with the devotion that a person who attends a panel does. And now I have, watched Into Doctor Who, all the Firefly, all the classics that I've, my brother gave me a list. If you're going to be on a panel, you have to read all this. So, people laugh at me in my neighborhood because I'm telling you, I want you to have this picture in your head. I wear one of those headlights lamps, and I walk my dogs at night, reading a book, walking the dogs, because I have so much catching up to do. So I'm the guy, the nutcase in the neighborhood, with the headlamp, the 2 dogs, and the science fiction novel in its left hand.
Staff meeting as small as you are.
And you'll notice that we all actually sympathize with that. We've all been in sort of that position. Our unofficial panelist is, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name?
Eitan.
Eitan Collin.
What he said. Also, we wrote the book collaboratively together. My background is a public school teacher in economics, government, and history. In some of the more interesting, and by that I mean outright violent public schools this country has to offer.
Compton?
Yeah, 2 years in Compton, yeah. That was fun in that oh my god, oh my god, oh my god sort of way.
Yeah.
And the experience, you survive, you survive. So,
And it makes you stronger.
yeah. 1 year up in Alaska, in a place where literally the rifle club was the defense against the bears. That was also cute. The one and only time I actually ever carried a gun, because there you have to. And then it occurred to me that, I've got all this writing, so maybe I should go ahead and give it a shot. And lo and behold, my brother came along and said, we should, and here I am.
I'm Jude Marie Green, despite the name tag. This is actually what I'm called. My real name is Jude Marie Green. I publish under that name. And I'm published in various magazines, short stories. And I'm actually associate editor for Abyss and Apex online magazine. We're just in February releasing our first anthology, The Best of Abyss and Apex. And I happen to have a story in it, which, makes my life happier. And actually the story is about aliens that are storms on a planet, which was a fun exploration for me to figure out how to get aliens out of storms, big storms. Okay. And, okay, so the panel here is about overrated novels and forgotten classics. Now, when I first heard the panel description, I went out online and I found an article from the Guardian, and I'd like to read you the first paragraph of that, which was absolutely fascinating to me. It was, and it's all about the undiscovered classics one, the forgotten classic one, as opposed to the overrated novel part, which I'm sure we're all going to have fun just dissing writers right and left here. But about the forgotten classics, the Guardian article says, the afterlife of books and writers is an enthralling subject full of strange vicissitudes and unintended consequences, as even the most cursory reflection on the life and reputation of Shakespeare suggests. It's also a story of forgotten bestsellers, fashionable names swept into oblivion, and overlooked figures growing in posthumous stature. The unexplored fact of literary life is that most books fail in at least 2 ways. First, they do not live up to their author's high expectations. Writers who are honest can see that most typescripts represent the wreck of a grander, partially fulfilled idea. Second, the majority of books fall stillborn from the press, never living up to their author's hopes for recognitions or dreams of a large, admiring audience.
And the money.
So those bestseller lists and crowded festival appearances create a misleading impression of the true circumstances of literary life. For every book that tickles public taste, captures the zeitgeist, and hits the jackpot, there are thousands that do not appeal to contemporary readers, fail to find a sufficient audience, and almost disappear. Okay, so, Danny.
Donnie, yes.
Donnie,
it takes a while. So where do you start? Do you want to start with the 10? If you're going to ask me the 10 most underrated, I would punt over to Aton. If you were going to ask me the 10 that I think are overrated, I would take that shot, because in my position where I'm being force-fed lots of things that people are being called classics, you have to read this. I certainly have strong opinions.
I would say it would be more interesting to hear your take as
As a virgin?
What's been overinflated as far as you're concerned, as a virgin to the genre?
Interesting. So far, for me, the things that have been overinflated, and I put 5 together, some are going to piss people off. I thought that Ender's Game was overrated. I really did. I felt like, okay, he's going to go into another scenario, there's going to be 30 more, it's going to get more difficult, and he's going to win. Okay, he's going to go into another thing, and now they're removing all the barriers, and now there's no rules, and he's going to win. Okay, now it's going to get really big, and there's going to be thousands, and what's he going to do? And he's going to win. And so at the point that I realized there was no, there will be a big argument about, the angst and the stuff that he went through and the loneliness and all that. Maybe that's the meat of the novel and not the battles themselves, which is a good argument. But I need a situation where, even in a character like that, he has to lose. Not just psychologically with his friends. I needed him to lose a damn battle. Nobody's that perfect, I'm sorry. So I will start there as my number 1, and we can sort of move down, because if I went through this whole list, I'd keep talking for the whole session. But that, for me, was like, everybody said you have to read it. I read it, and I was actually quite disappointed.
For me, I loved the first 3 books of Asimov's Foundation series. They were phenomenal. They were groundbreaking. And I wish to God he hadn't written the last 2. I mean, I know it won the Hugo Award, but I felt that he tried so hard to combine it with his other universes, and he didn't have to. And the plot line just went into this completely weird direction. And for me, the concept is that I remember the first 3. I remember them clearly. I read them literally 20 years ago. Actually, good Lord, 23. So, getting old. And I remember them. I just remember them clearly in my head. And I also remember reading the final 2 that he wrote, the sequels, not the prequels. And I had to go back to Wikipedia and tap on, well, what the heck were those about again? And oh, good Lord, yeah. And that was the thing there. So I think that those 2, again, it won a Hugo. I don't know why. He took the plot line, and then he combined it with this, and he brought in the Zagaia thing, and then he wanted, and I was just, And the first 3, you cannot speak highly of them enough for what they did, and for how seminal they were in terms of just science fiction. The last 2, so I suppose I'll just throw 2 of those novels there. Foundation's Edge and Foundation on Earth, I believe they were called.
And those were your underrated. You thought that they were
Overrated.
not as great.
Overrated.
Overrated, okay. That brings me to a point I was going to make, the Hugo list, Hugo winning novels. You can go and download the Hugo winning novel list and even the nominees for any given year offline. And when you go through and you read them, it's a real hit or miss kind of experience. I just read, I think it was Davy by Alan Pangborn. That won the Hugo, I think it was the early 60s. And it left me very cold. I thought that Tarzan was a much more interesting take on that same kind of scenario. So it really depends on your taste, and I think that a lot of the Hugo winners are a reflection of the society at the time. What we think, what's popular, what's fun to read. Which actually leaves me a little bit startled that The Road has gained so much traction. Okay, Cormac McCarthy's definitely very divisive. People either really love The Road or really hate The Road, and I happen to be in the, oh my God, not another literary author reinventing the science fiction genre and doing it wrong. So I'm sure we've all read better post-apocalyptic stories. This list that I downloaded from The Guardian actually has Russell Hoban's Ridley Walker on it, which is almost exactly like The Road, except better. Danny?
Donnie?
Donnie?
Takes a while. Trust me.
You can just
Even
call me
if people have
Anton.
known me for months and see my name tag, you'll get it. Eitan and I said we had better sell lots and lots of books because that's the only way people are going to eventually know our names.
How about Mr. Colin #1?
Good day, I'm number 2 again.
Are we still on? Are we? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
He's the little brother, that's what's so funny. So, well, I guess if we're still on our list of books that I feel are overrated, as you're a new science fiction author, you can't show up at a panel without having read New Romancer by William Gibson. I was like, what's the deal? You know, I get the note. Look, I was an art major. I studied art history, so I get the notion of it's an important piece of work because it changed the way people wrote. I get it. But at some point, when that becomes more important than entertaining a reader, then you've moved away from a book for the purpose, in my opinion, of what a book is, and now you're simply, you know, you're, as modern artists do, throwing shit and feces on a wall and saying, I'm changing the way people think about art. Well, yes, you are, but I don't necessarily want to look at it. So this book was all over the place for me. I know, and I see it. It really very much reflected the time, the 80s and the glitz and all of that, but there was still no storyline that I could follow, and no satisfaction at the end that I was necessarily happy with. And some would argue, well, you know, that's because you're looking at the traditional way of reading a book, and this isn't the way books go, you know. And I believe that to a point. If you look at Memento, the movie, that, you know, was all screwed up, it resolved itself and it was brilliantly done. If you look at Pulp Fiction, it starts backwards and moves to the beginning, confusing, done differently, but still quite satisfying in my opinion. I need a book to do that for me also. I don't mind you screwing with the genre. I don't mind you changing things up. But still, please, sir, ma'am, entertain me. And this book I found not entertaining. I found it as schizophrenic and psychotic as I suspect his drug-addled mind at the time was. But I have no opinion other than that.
If I may insert a comment about Neuromancer, I actually finally read Neuromancer about a year and a half ago. And after I finished reading it, I said to myself, wow, this is so derivative. It is just like all the other cyberpunk stories that have come out in the last 20 years. And, you know, that's tongue-in-cheek, obviously, because Neuromancer is the father of the cyberpunk movement. And I think as that, it has, you know, standing, because it's actually caused a whole generation of writers to go, wow, I could write that badly. But actually, a lot of really good cyberpunk has come out of the movement. A lot of good short stories. I'm more into short fiction really than into the novels, I'm afraid. But so it does.
It's a fair argument that sometimes you need somebody to come along and shake things up, even if they don't shake it up well, in order so that somebody who understands what the shake-up is about can create something shaken up well. Fair enough.
Anton?
This one's going to be a little bit strange for Overrated, because on a personal level, I really liked it. But I teach history. I love the Napoleonic era. The Regency thing was pretty cool to me. And I really had a tough time understanding why this thing won a Hugo, because it just went on and on and on and on. And some of you might be guessing what I'm talking about, the Professor Norrell and Mr. Strange. Which is, and again, I'm sitting there, when I heard it won the Hugo, I was like, why? And again, it's not because I personally did enjoy it, but I love Regency. I like Pride and Prejudice. I mean, so if you're into that, then I can see where that is directly up your line. But for the standard science fiction or even fantasy, it was a slog, and it just went forever and ever. I mean, there literally talk about chapters you just didn't need. I didn't need to know about, you know, the Napoleonic campaign in Spain, or Wellington's campaign in Spain for like 4 chapters before they actually got to the point. And it's interesting, and then they go into medieval English history and the magical world. And their villain takes forever to introduce, and then finally realize he is a. But yeah, and then you realize, okay, yeah, he is a villain. He took the wife. All right, got it. Yeah, so there you go. But for that, it was just a matter of why did it win? And again, I'm conflicted because I actually did enjoy all of that, but I'm a history major. I taught history, and I thought the way that they combined it all was very well. So maybe there's just a lot more history majors out there in the Hugo Award committee than I actually thought. But there were other books at the time. I remember thinking, why did this one actually win?
It's not a committee.
Ah. Oh. Ah. My first year.
Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is one of those books that makes you happy that a literary writer is saying that she's not a genre writer.
Can you speak up a little?
I'm sorry, this particular novel is one of those novels that makes me happy that a literary writer is saying that she's not, or pretending she's not a genre writer. Her and Margaret Atwood, who still says she doesn't write genre. So, as he says, you know, why did it get a Hugo when there were other things out there that were great? It's because it was a wonderful historical romp. Or maybe because it was a good novel to have on your table, so when people came over to see, they'd see that you were literary and genre at the same time.
So the English patient.
Well, certainly closer to home, and you know, at the risk of pissing off someone I may have to work with, or you know, sit on a panel with. I hated the Secret Policemen's Union, which won the Hugo last year, and it may be a personal thing. What's that?
You finished it?
Let me tell you something, I almost didn't, but for the fact that it was a book for tape in my car and I had no choice and I was going to see it to the end, I probably wouldn't have. And that might have had something to do with it, by the way. So, you know, full disclosure, I listened to it as an MP3 in my car. The voiceover artist I didn't particularly like. What I couldn't stand about the book, though, was an overabundance of similes. Way to every other sentence was a simile. You know, okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is probably being Jewish. It felt too Jewish to me.
You're Jewish?
It's a Jewish setting. But it felt like it was, I need to prove that it is a Jewish setting in every single sentence. So I'm certainly not completely objective, but I noticed, you know, at Den Invention, a lot of people were scratching their heads saying, I just don't get it. So I sort of felt like that was a little bit overrated as well. It didn't. In the end, it was a detective sort of mystery in alt history. Okay, he's coming from out of the genre into this genre.
The 8 deadly words.
Yeah, if someone can elucidate, please, because I didn't quite get it.
I love mysteries, I love old history, and I gave up after 2 chapters.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, that kind of leads me into my next point. One of the series of books I've read, and it took me a lot of work to actually read them. They were hard to read for me just because, as a writer, I wanted to stop every time and take a ready pen to all kinds of things, whereas basically anything that Dan Brown's written.
Yes.
The storyline, I mean, he has a really cool running story, and then another, and then more, and the plot holes are like Grand Canyons, and the grammar, you just want to like cry, but people buy them. People buy them, people buy them, people vote for the Policemen's Union, people vote for Susanna Clark. I can't remember the name of the novel, but that people vote for them for the Hugos, they go out to the stores, they buy them, they become bestsellers, and they make millions of dollars for their authors. And my mantra of my writing group, and they're tired of hearing me say this, is that I want to learn how to write that badly. But is it a matter of taste? Is it a matter of...
I want to write in the worst possible way.
Yes, yes. And, you know, is it a matter of taste? Is it a matter of people out there really don't care about the writing quality as long as the story really compels you along? I don't think so, but that's a possibility. So what do you guys think? You just wrote your first novel here. What do you think? Is it written that badly?
Oh, we think our book's great.
There are two, Eitan and I work very well together because there are two very different disciplines. I'm an advertising copywriter. If I can't keep you going after the first paragraph, then I've lost you. From an advertising perspective, whether it's a television commercial, whether it's a print ad with 5 paragraphs, whether it's packaging on a toy with 1 sentence, I've lost you. And so my discipline is that I had better keep you interested. the story and the concept had better stay evident through the pages. Otherwise, all I'm doing is masturbating. And there's no reason to waste the audience's time, you know, or my time, to be perfectly honest. And Eitan and I have had some, you know, big fights over scenes that have had to go because they're not on point, they're not on strategy. And I'm thinking like an advertising guy.
Characters
I
that had
remember
to
being
go.
grilled. It's hilarious to have this vision, and by the way, in a science fiction conference. I doubt you'll ever hear this again. I used to do Barbie commercials. And what would happen is this. You go up into the 15th floor, a lot of very strong women would be on the other side of you. You know, I mean, it was like, you know, somewhat terrifying. You'd have a board on, you know, with everything laid out, all the pictures and all the text under, and on every single damn picture they would say, what's the scene objective? And you do this for, you know, for 20 frames. The scene objective here is that the girl discovers that she likes the whatever. What's the scene objective here? And to a certain extent, a book should have that too. It can't just be going, well, let's just make something big and beautiful because, you know, people want to read about it. Why does it keep carrying? Why is Fahrenheit 451 a classic and remains a classic? Because he never lets go of the ultimate message, which is that society has gotten to the point that emotions that are hurtful people don't want to deal with. On almost every page, he doesn't let you forget that. And that's important for me as a writer and as an advertising guy. And Eitan with a brilliant idea, and it was his idea, and it was sort of the combination of feeling very strongly that message had better be through all the way to the end. And you know, we just got our very first review, which thank God was a really good one. And that was the thing that I took out of it, which was really good from the reviewer, was they have not let go of message. You know, it starts with a strong concept and it ends with the concept, and that's, you know, that's good. So I feel very strongly that, again, I'm sitting here as a virgin, but I feel very strongly that a book should have that. Tor obviously felt that way, so you know, we got somewhere. And I want that out of my books. Even more so, I'm even more disappointed when the book starts out with a great premise and seems to meander. Terribly disappointed. One of them is on my list, which is somewhat of a shocker, which is, you know, given the fact that I'm going to be talking about classics, was City in the Stars, which is a brilliant book for lots of different reasons, but I was so disappointed because I was really into it in the same way that I was into 451, and then I felt like it became, what did you say, Eitan? What kind of novel? Fantasy? Or a...
meandering morass of conflicting ideas?
No, that's not what you said. Anyways, I did. Sorry.
So what do you think is the reason why these stories that we look at and we sneer at go mega hit, or get voted to Hugos, or get the awards in the literary
Honestly,
notice?
I think a lot of people don't read the books all the way through. I think a lot of times they read halfway through the book and they're like, wow, I really like this book. Oh, I have to go and do something else. I have to do this. And then it comes time to vote and they're like, oh yeah, I remember. That was great. You know? So.
Oh, I can't believe that. I don't believe that. I'll argue with you because I think science fiction fans are, I think that, you know, maybe, I don't even mean to speak of, but it's like, how many of us have read a book all the way to the end hoping it's going to get better? We are so like, exactly, we are so diligent, like, maybe on the last page it will all work out.
I would agree with you, except that the books that make it mega big don't make it in the science fiction community only. They break out into the larger general reading public, and I think when you confuse a general reader from a science fiction reader and try to think that they're the same, you will be disappointed. There are vast differences between a science fiction reader, for the most part, and a general reader.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain the Hugo.
Apparently, from what I heard,
Secret Policeman's Ball. So the Hugo's a popularity contest, as you know, seemed to be indicated over there.
What, maybe 500 people at the most.
And it is.
I didn't vote.
It's if you have multiple con, you get 12.
Okay. We better be really nice.
It's more fancy, because we want to make the face look
We'll refuse to be on a panel like this at next World Cup.
But that doesn't necessarily work either, because there is a backlash against some parts.
Okay, so we'll stick with whoever we have to.
But
You refer to the books that, you know, you start and you don't finish. I have one that I call the 3Z book. It put me to sleep 3 times before I could actually finish it. The author is supposed to be a very, very good author. I haven't read anything else by him, so I have to kind of reserve my first impression of him. And the book is within a topic that I love, Star Wars. And I had a terrible time finishing the book. In fact, I don't think I read the next two out of the trilogy, out of that 3-book series. And I've had other ones by other authors that have been excellent. That one was definitely a 3Z book.
My brother doesn't let me talk about what I think about Star Wars.
I'm open-minded.
No, that you talk. We walked out of the last movie.
Episode 3.
Episode 3, we literally walked out after about 13 minutes and demanded our money back. And the kid behind it, you know, this like pimply-faced kid was like, but it's in digital. Well, the same music. Ships have been going up and down for billions of years, and all of a sudden this one has to land so that Mr. Lucas can have a beautiful scene where something explodes on a runway in the most expensive real estate in the galaxy. You know, all of a sudden R2-D2 has flames and can fly. Where was he, you know, before? You know,
He got downgraded?
yeah, you know, I mean, there were, in those first 13, you know, the notion of these, the Jedi guys are coming into the ship to attack it, and all these little things get onto the wing and start drilling into it, right? Well, here's an idea. You've got 6 little robots on a wing drilling it. Why don't they just, I don't know, explode? Kill the Jedi guys, you know? So there are all these things to show you that it's cool and technology losing what you and I might say is, well, you know, you're in a place where these things could stop. It could realistically stop. So why don't they? Because it's Star Wars. Okay. I want more out of my science fiction. I want Battlestar Galactica. You know, the second one. The second one. The second one. I want Blade Runner. I want Gattaca. I want things that make me think, wait a second, who's the bad guy here? Wait a second, the evil guy is practically as interesting as the good guy, who maybe is not so good. That's the stuff I want. I don't want stuff where the Jedi Knights, you know, appear on the floor, there's 1,000 of the Imperial Guard around them, and I don't know, why don't they blow themselves up too? You know, to stop these guys who we know are going to take over the ship. So that's why we walk out. But I'm not passionate about this, just, you know.
I'm going to introduce you to a useful phrase.
Yeah.
This is occasionally referred to as the 8 deadly words on Redguard's composition. Anyway, if you get to the point where you look at the book and you think, I don't care what happens to any of these people, you are now free to shut the book and go do something useful.
You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And
I'm finding that
the secret police, but about the time the guy stuck his nose into the pickle slicer for no apparent reason, except that the book said, the plot said he was supposed to stick his nose into the pickle slicer. I said, that's nice, bye-bye.
The point that I should have left was when he describes, you know, how a nose smells coffee. You know, a lot too many nose references. As a Jewish guy, I'm a little uncomfortable with it. But, what do I need to know? How many molecules go into smelling coffee coming in? Come on. Sorry.
So that's where the science comes into the science fiction.
Well, how does it smell that it's
Right. Right. There you go.
But then what about books that you sit down and you need a dictionary, not so much to enjoy them, but to fully understand them?
I like those books, but that's my prejudice.
Right.
I
But
love
between
technology.
Diane Duane's
There is actually-
Wizard series and Neil Stephenson's books.
There is a subgenre, I guess, of style monkeys who like to use the big words, and they usually use them correctly and make them, you know, pretty.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a little bit tough going if you don't already know those, you know, 25-cent words. So.
Me like small words.
I was just going to say, one of my pet peeves is the first book is fantastic.
Yes.
The author is great. One that sticks in my mind, and I tried the next two, and I don't know how many jillion are after. I did not finish 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And that's Frank Herbert's Dune. Dune was fantastic.